Who dumped a whole truckload of fizzies into the swim meet? Who delivered the medical school cadavers to the alumni dinner? Every Halloween, the trees are filled with underwear. Every spring, the toilets explode.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brand John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
You know, it seems like it's been like 3 days since we've been on the air together.
Can you believe that, Brad? It's an eternity. If you're listening to this on YouTube, I took yesterday off because it was widely across the St. Louis area the first day of school, so I took yesterday off.
And we need to talk about that. Okay, we started off the show with one of the classic lines from Animal House, Dean Wormer. Do you ever see that movie, John?
I'm a big fan of that movie, yeah.
I saw an interesting little thing on a Facebook Shorts. Guy was talking about how he was traveling and he was on the same page or the same plane. I don't even know the real actor's name. Do you know his name, the guy who's Dean Wormer?
No, I don't know.
Anyway, the guy is apparently Dean Wormer's in first class. We'll call him Dean Wormer. I don't know is the actor's name. And this guy is boarding the plane and he's walking back to coach and he sees the actor who played Dean Wormer in first class and he goes, "Dean Wormer!" And Dean Wormer says, "You know, I had other roles in my career." But you know what's sad about that is actors get typecast with certain roles. You know what I mean? I mean, they're...
Yeah, of course,
and like, for example, you go back to the history of Gilligan's Island, most of those actors and actresses on Gilligan's Island had a tough time getting work after that because everybody knew him as Gilligan and the Captain and Ginger and Mary Ann. And although Jim Backus was making lots of money doing voiceover stuff. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That is the voice of John Combest. You spell his name Combest. I spell it because you need to type that into your computer, put that into your smartphone, JOHNCOMBEST.com. That will bring up this site, which quite honestly looks like Web 1.0. Okay, and John is not embarrassed about that because John is all about speed. It loads quick, no graphics. It'll load on an old Radio Shack TRS-80. It's that fast, okay, as far as his website is concerned. What he does is every single day he compiles a list of all the stories he thinks are the big stories. We get together every morning, at least most Monday mornings, but it's a Tuesday now, and we bring this guy in.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he does this.
Now on with the countdown.
And we start with...
In third place...
Well, we tease him a lot because we got him on the spot. What show is that from, Brad?
I'm sorry, he's drinking my Mountain Dew. I have no idea.
Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh, that's
one of my favorite shows, Brad, from the 70s and 80s when I was a youngster. Did you ever watch good old Gabe Kaplan there, Brad?
You know, I was never into that show. It just never did it for me, to be honest with you. I mean, I've seen some of them in reruns, but to me, it's like, it's got a great cast. Obviously, John Travolta is probably you look back, and he's the huge alumni of that cast.
Yeah. Well, I was 3 or 4 years old, so, I mean, it was my level of humor, Brad. I sing it because... at Mizzou, there's been a big thing for the last decade called the Welcome Black BBQ. And a big policy change from the University of Missouri. Brad, as foreshadowing, I think you and I might disagree about this. I don't know. But a black student group, they're called the Legion of Black Collegians. They're very upset because the University of Missouri says that they need to change the name of their barbecue from the Welcome Black BBQ to the Welcome Black and Gold Barbecue. So if you're not from Missouri or you're blissfully unaware, black and gold are the Mizzou colors. And the university says that changing the name will bring will underscore, inclusivity and the fact that the groups at Mizzou aren't excluding others. By the way, as an aside, I'm going to interrupt myself. Did you know Christopher Ave is a spokesman for Mizzou now?
Who's Christopher Ave?
He was at the Post-Dispatch for a long. I guess we haven't talked about him on the show. He was a leader at the Post-Dispatch for a long time. Then he went and worked for Sam Page for a number of years. I thought you might have known him. He's a longtime journalist. Anyway, he's a spokesman for Mizzou now. So Brad, I gotta ask you, and I'll spoil it with my view here. I think if the Legion of Black Collegians wants to have a barbecue called Welcome Black Barbecue, what's wrong with that? I don't know. I know why the university is doing this, but what do you think about this?
Well, first off, Christopher Ave, his sister is Marie Ave. I don't know if you know.
She is, yeah.
Okay.
And people get her name wrong a lot of times because they'll call it by last name first, but it's actually Maria Ave.
Right. Okay. I was somewhat surprised when I saw this headline. I didn't, I saw it on a couple different websites, and I thought to myself, isn't that interesting? Because I've always said that if you can have a black student union or a black this or a black congressional black caucus, why can't you have a congressional white caucus? And the answer has always been, well, they get special treatment or whatever the answer is. Okay. Yeah. And now apparently their special treatment is being revoked. Is that what you're somewhat surprised about?
Yeah, I think so. And the interesting thing is that Mizzou has taken steps to eliminate, at least on the surface, DEI programs, special DEI, essentially DEI divisions. Now, to me, Brad, this makes sense because worst case scenario is you have a white sorority having, white girl summer party, or a white fraternity having a white boy, end of white boy summer party. So this sets the precedent where Mizzou can go to a white group later and say, no, you can't have something like that because we told the Legion of Black Collegians and we got to play fair. And if we treat them this way, we have to treat you that way. So they're setting a precedent by doing it. So I understand it. But apart from that, if a black group wants to have a black barbecue and they're not standing there saying, Brad Hildebrand, you can't come in here. You're too mocha Java skin tone to get in here. If they want to call it Welcome Black, let them call it Welcome Black. I don't see what the big deal is.
Well, see, I'm with you there because that was a question I was going to ask. Is it only open to blacks? I mean,
no, anybody can. As far as I understand, anyone can attend. So you and I could show if we were students, I guess, and we had a right to be on campus. Yeah, I don't think they're saying black students only. I just think that and again, Mizzou's doing this so that later when they crack down on white groups, they can say, look, at least we're consistent. But it irks me because you should be able to let Asian students or black students have their own groups and let them have their own barbecue or whatever they want to do.
Well, and maybe we can talk about this later. Something came up last night at the DNC. There was a speaker, I think she's from Minnesota. Matter of fact, I know she's from Minnesota. And she's an Indian, and she's a part of the White Earth Nation, which I thought to myself, okay. Well, I thought to myself, there's no way there's a real tribe called.
You and I started that,
right?
And we
exactly.
set up a lemonade stand outside Bush Wildlife, and we called ourselves the White Earth Nation. Like, how quickly would the Post-Dispatch couldn't find Highway 94, but if they could, how fast would they be out there being like, oh, look at these Christian nationalists?
The crazy part of that is I looked it up, and it's a for real tribe. It's like an offshoot of the. I mean, it's sort of interesting if you get into it. And matter of fact, if you just type, and I think the URL is whiteearth.org. And I'm going like, okay, now hold on a minute now. But what's interesting about that is, okay, don't we normally consider the Indians to be what of color, not of white, but of color? In other words, non-whites?
You're right, non-whites.
Right. I'm like, okay, I'm totally confused. But you know what?
And White Earth, by the way, sounds like an essential oil that some stay-at-home mom would try to peddle you on Facebook Marketplace.
Or it's available at one of the marijuana dispensaries, right? Hey, this marijuana was cultivated in White Earth. It's special earth. Gives you that.
You know what you and I need to do, Brad? We need to join White Earth Nation, and we need to set up a casino at Bush Wildlife on one of the lakes. Like, go to Lake 33, like somewhere where you can catch some largemouth bass. We'll have Winning for Missouri Education 2.0. And we'll allow sports betting and gambling at the August Bush Conservation site.
You do know that all the fish you catch out there are radioactive. You do know that.
Yeah, that's why I fish and eat them.
They're mutant fish. Okay.
I want to be super strong. That's story number 3 today, Brad.
And number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Follow up from a story from last week. A gentleman, East St. Louis scholar Elijah Gantt, The man who had a simple collision with a police officer, and everybody's riding him now about being a bad guy. His bond is at $500,000 cash only bond. And he and his attorney did not dispute it, Brad. And Mr. Gantt was in the courtroom with, quote, smiles. He gave a big smile to the dozens of people. This story is from Dana Reek from the Post-Dispatch. Now, Brad, one guess only. Who did this East St. Louis scholar hire to get him out of trouble?
It was Jason's brother. It was
Scott Rosenblum.
Scott Rosenbaum. Oh no, hold it now. No, I get those two guys confused. It was Scott Rosenblum.
Yes, because Scott Rosenblum is noted criminal defense attorney, and he says he wants to see a little bit more video before he contests the $500,000 bond. And again, the Post-Dispatch has the mugshot, of course, of Mr. Gantt as he's all smiles after he put this officer into intensive care, and big smiles in the courtroom. So he's clearly unrepentant because, Brad, he knows that it was just a collision. It was just a collision. The officer just had a little bumpsy on his head, and it's no big deal, right, Brad?
Yeah, man, I tell you what, the whole crazy thing is I've heard people come out and say, well, why were the police getting so upset? They were just jiggling the fence a little bit. Have you seen the video of the jiggling of the fence? Have you seen that?
I have seen it, Brad. Just a little jiggle.
Yeah, just a little jiggle, like it's going to come out of the ground kind of jiggle, but that's neither here nor there.
It's like when you're motivated by one of your Cletus McFarland videos, and you go out there and you're doing a little work on your tranny, and not that kind of tranny, Brad. I mean your transmission. You just give it a little jiggle, see if you can get something. That's what they were doing to the fence. Now, the Post-Dispatch visual that I have up today is when the officers are carrying – you should really check this out, Brad. When the officers are carrying – Mr. Gantt. This picture was taken by Christian Gooden of the Post-Dispatch. There are 7 officers carrying Mr. Gantt. Now, Mr. Gantt had fled. He had kicked one of the officers in the shoulder. This is according to body cam video. The 7 officers from Ferguson carrying Mr. Gantt are all black, Brad. So to what we discussed last week, the people that are protesting Ferguson police for being racist and whatever, the 7 officers trying to carry the savage are all black.
Well, the crazy thing about this, the chief of police is black, the mayor is black, and I have to tell you, this chief of police, this guy has scored some serious points with me because, first off, the guy is telling it like it is. He's telling it like it is. We've done everything you've wanted us to do. Why are you still protesting? And secondly, he has passion for what he does. And if you hear that, I read this. I haven't talked about this because you weren't here yesterday, but I read this over the weekend that he came from the county police, and the officer who is still in intensive care, he convinced him to come to county police because he says, look, we're making changes here. There's a good feeling about what we're doing. Come to work here in Ferguson and you won't regret it. Well, sort of prophetic words, I mean,
go ahead, Brad.
I mean, and to me, that's so incredible. I mean, think about that for a minute. You bring your buddy over to work with you at the police department, and ultimately he gets... he's still not out of the woods. We all, hope and pray that he makes this miraculous recovery, but so far it doesn't look good. You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't look good for him. A gentleman who was also friends with the officer is a guy named Justin Sparks, who plays heavily in our number 1 story today.
Yes, and matter of fact, they were both county police officers, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
They were?
Yeah, okay, number 1.
The number 1...
Yet another follow-up to a story from 2 weeks ago, Brad. And somehow a state agency has managed to annoy people on both sides of a political debate. You'll recall Lifetime Fitness got in big trouble from both sides because at first they allowed a man in the woman's locker room, and the company's policy was, hey, the man had a driver's license that said that he was actually a woman. That's what we go on. Okay, that's pretty much fair, right? And then the gym ended up kicking the gentleman out because of what they were threatening social media posts. So the crux of it, Brad, if you recall when we talked about it, was how did this guy get a license from the Department of Revenue that says that he's a woman when he's clearly a man? So apparently there was a form at one point that you could fill out if you wanted to, in theory, change your gender on your driver's license. And that form disappeared from the Department of Revenue's website after the Lifetime fitness controversy. That form was called Form 5532. It has been replaced, Brad. The department policy now is that you must have a medical document that shows that you've had a gender reassignment surgery or a court order that involves your gender designation in order to get your ID changed. And by the way, I would just point out real quick, because I like to do this because I think it's important, is that there was a blog post from the Missouri Independent by a woman named Annalise Hanshaw, had a piece up. The Associated Press, Brad, Summer Ballantyne from the Post-Dispatch did a piece on this. And then the Post-Dispatch diversity reporter, a woman named Andrea Henderson, has a brief and story filled with a lack of detail up on the public radio blog today. But 3 stories about this. I would suggest people take a look at all 3 because you could see 2 really thorough pieces from Summer and Annalise, and then a kind of a cursory look from the diversity reporter. But so the crux of it, Brad, is that both sides are mad because Promo, which is the LGBTQIA*+ group, they're upset because they say that the department made this change quietly and it hurts transgender people that want to change their gender on a driver's license. And still, Brad, Representative Justin Sparks is not happy with the Department of Revenue because his point is, if I can speak for him based on his comments here, was that the Department of Revenue can't just make changes like this without legislative approval. So in 2016, they said, hey, no, all you got to do is fill out this form. And the legislature apparently didn't approve it. And now they made the second change without going to the legislature. So legislators are not happy with the fact that DOR is making these policy changes without their approval. So, Brad, the Department of Revenue has managed to, by their actions, at least temporarily annoy people on both sides of this.
John, can I make a comment here?
Yeah, please do.
Justin Sparks is naive because of the fact that on so many levels, state, federal, county, municipal, they change regulations all the time without permission of the governing body. I mean, like, for example, we're governed by the FCC. There's probably, lately, there's not a week that doesn't go by that there's some new change of regulation or a new implementation of this or change of that or something like that. And they're not going to the Congress and saying, hey, we're the FCC and we're thinking about changing this. They just do what they want, and they call that.
That's true. But hold on. I don't think Sparks is naive for that. I think he knows that. I think he's well aware that happens, and he says it shouldn't.
So in other words, he's saying that the shall we call the deep state, which essentially is all the alphabet, in the federal it's the EPA and DHS and all that kind of stuff, and in the state it's SOS and DESI and things like that. He's saying that the lawmakers should actually make the laws and not the bureaucrats? Is that what he's...
Not the pointy-headed bureaucrats.
Is that what he's saying?
Again, Annalise Hanshaw has his comments in here, and he said, quote, we're going to get to the bottom of what happened in the Department of Revenue and that form they issued several years ago, talking about the original form. And he says, quote, it was inappropriate, and in my opinion, it is not legal. So, yeah, Justin Sparks knows that this happens all the time, that bureaucrats make policy, but I think his point is that they need, for something like this, they need to go to the legislature for approval.
Yeah, but back then it was no big deal. You're
right. But you know what, Brad? I think some people would say it was starting to be people in the transgender community were making noise about this that long ago.
Oh, man, don't get me going about this.
They just weren't showing up in the locker room with their dongs. Well, I can't say that on the air. They weren't showing up in a locker room with their genitalia out.
It's my thing that when I started on the BS show with Shelley, where one day I went to the paint store and I got a paint chip that's my skin color, and what am I, Mocha Java? Is that what I am? Mocha Java? I can't remember.
That's what you said.
It's in the other studio, and I had some pushback on that because people go, you can't just say you're a person of color. And I'm going like, well, no, hold on a minute now. I can walk into, this morning on this air, I can say, you know what, I was born a man, I've been a man most of my life, I'm tired of being a man, I'm a woman, okay? And people have to say, okay, fine, Brad, he's a woman now. Right. Why can't I wake up in the morning and say, this morning I'm a Cherokee, and tomorrow morning I'm going to be a black person, and then the week after that I'm going to be Asian, and why can't I do that? I mean, but yet the interesting thing is you look at the name that which has been the name that, by the way, which is retired, which I always think was interesting, Rachel Dolezal. I believe I have her name correct.
Yeah.
And if anybody knows the Rachel Dolezal story, it's to the point where, okay, so I don't quite understand. You can wake up in the morning, or you can just all of a sudden one day say, I'm a man in a woman's body, but I'm really a woman. But you can't say I'm a white dude in a black guy's body and I'm really black. You know what I mean? Or I'm really white. You know, I mean, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. But
I think we should just all embrace the fact, Brad, that you and I are members of White Earth Nation.
We have to take.
You think we could launch a hostile takeover? Like if that chick's from Minnesota is in Chicago, somebody's not tending to her nation. So what if we went there and got the natives all worked up with pitchforks and torches, and we took over White Earth Nation?
Well, we did. Well, all we have to do is just declare ourselves White Earthers, right? Hey, we're White Earthers
I'm
now.
not a flat earther, but I am a White Earther.
Okay, we have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?